chapter 7. In our 1 year discipleship, we're using our Disciple Life Journal as our curriculum for this year of discipleship, reading one chapter a day each week. So we have 5 chapters this week, and we have 7 days to read those 5 chapters and ask the Lord how we can apply those things to our life. So we're glad that you've joined us this evening. My name is Dave Ketchend. I'm the associate pastor here at Old Zion Hill Baptist Church, and your Wednesday night Bible study leader for tonight. So glad that you've joined us. I've entitled tonight's Bible study, Responding to Judgmental Scrutiny. Now, I actually had a hard time fitting that all on the slide. Responding to Judgmental Scrutiny. We're going to be reading 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 3 through 5. Just as a bit of introduction, there's 3 verses here, but there are some incredible application about how to deal with situations that arise when people criticize you, and they criticize your motives, or they are judging you or evaluating you, and some very useful application and very useful teaching about how to respond to that and to deal with that, because that can be some of the most hurtful things that can take place is when a fellow believer goes after you in a way that is judgmental and scrutinizing. So we're going to be reading 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 3 through 5. If you have your Bibles, you want to get that out. Otherwise, the passage will be appearing on the screen. 1 Corinthians 4, 3 through 5. Paul is writing to the church at Corinth, and there are some Christians there in Corinth who are criticizing him, and so he's responding to that. I care very little if I am judged by you or any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me. Therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait till the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of men's hearts. At that time, each will receive his praise from God. 3 little verses, but in those verses there are 3 things that Paul instructs us not to do, and there are 3 things that Paul instructs us to do when we are confronted with scrutinizing judgment or scrutinizing criticism. Now, he starts off by saying, I care very little if I am judged by you. Now, here we need to get a real understanding of unpacking this verse and what it means. We need to have a quick word study of what the words mean. The word judge here, when I care very little if I am judged by you, is the Greek word anakrino. Now, anakrino means to scrutinize, evaluate, look at, turn it over and back and forth, and really scrutinize something. That's what anakrino means. It's not really a negative word, because in the same book of 1 Corinthians, when Paul is talking about taking the Lord's Supper, he says that you need to judge yourself before you take the Lord's Supper, and the word there is anakrino. And so it's not a negative word, but in this context, it is a anakrino, is scrutinizing and coming to a condemning or judgmental conclusion. That's the context of these verses. So we're talking about somebody scrutinizing you, looking at you, what you did, what you didn't do, what you thought you should have done, couldy, wouldy, shouldy of the things. What should I have done, what could I have done, and that I didn't do, that I can scrutinize and criticize. So Paul, it's important to understand the words that are being used and the context in which they're being used in. So Paul starts off by saying 3 things. Then when we are confronted with scrutinizing judgment, there's 3 things that we're not to do. And you may find these to be rather interesting. The first thing that we're not to do is that are not to accept that or receive that from others. He starts off by saying, I care very little if you scrutinize me. That's a kind of a soft translation, quite frankly. Basically, it actually means I could give a rip less if you scrutinize me. He does not receive or accept that scrutiny. It is possible for you to not receive that kind of scrutiny. When somebody is judging you and criticizing you, especially if it's someone that you have a relationship with or if it's another Christian, it stings. There's no way that it doesn't sting. And it's real easy to simply accept or receive that criticism and to be wounded by it. But Paul starts off by saying, I care very little if you do that. Okay? And then the second thing that we're not to do is that we don't accept it from worldly authorities. Now, this gets into a whole different subject matter of what constitutes God created authorities. God has created various authority structures in the world. One of them is government, one of them is the home, one of them is the church, one of them is our employer. Those are God created and God ordained systems of authority. And Paul specifically says, I don't accept criticism from you, and I don't accept criticism from human courts. Now, so he is referring to a worldly authority, even though it is a legitimate authority. He's saying, I'm not going to accept the scrutiny and the judgment of my motives from worldly authorities that are not in tune with the ways of God and the Spirit of God. So we are not to receive or accept scrutinizing judgment from others, and we're not to accept it from worldly authorities, not to take it to heart, not to be wounded by it, not to receive it. The third thing that we're not to do, and this one may surprise you, he says, I don't even scrutinize condemningly myself. Did you know that the Bible tells you not to judge yourself like this? Not to scrutinize in a condemning way yourself. When I show this to people, they're really quite surprised that the Bible says that we're not to do that kind of thing to ourselves. Now it is true, and it's actually a healthy thing. When somebody criticizes us, most people who are fundamentally emotionally normal will at least pause and give some consideration to the validity of the criticism. Okay, that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about, I don't even judge myself, is that because somebody said something mean to me or criticizing to me, I automatically assume that it's right, or I automatically accept the judgment. That's what that's saying. So there's three things that we're not supposed to do. We're not supposed to accept the confronting, scrutinizing judgment of others. We're not to accept the confronting, scrutinizing judgment of worldly authorities, and we're not to do it to ourselves. I have used this passage in counseling for many, many years of people who are struggling with guilt and shame and those kinds of things, where people have shamed them, or they've done some things that they feel guilty about. And I explain to them that those kinds of feelings and those kinds of experiences can be dealt with very, very effectively if you apply these teachings that are in these three little verses. I've had experienced counseling with people with PTSD, Vietnam War veterans that fought in the war, ambulance, emergency vehicle responders that have been to one too many car wrecks and seen horrible things take place. And I've used these verses to help them process those very traumatic experiences. And it is a powerful, powerful understanding if we follow and do what is being talked about here. So three things that we're not to do. We're not to accept the condemning scrutiny from others. We're not to accept it from worldly authorities, and we're not to do it to ourselves. But then he goes right on and to things that we are to do. Three things that we are to do. And he goes on and says, I care very little if you judge me or any human court. I don't even judge myself. But then he says, but my conscience is clear. Now, what does that mean? Our conscience is that part of us the Bible says that the law of God is written on every human heart. So everybody has a conscience. And so there is an inborn or implanted sense of right and wrong. So Paul is saying, what you're criticizing me of, my conscience is clear. I know what you said that I did or didn't do. I understand what you say that I did or didn't do. I know what I did and what I didn't do, but why I did it is not what you're saying. You're saying that my motive was one thing, and I know what my motive was. Okay, so because of that, I didn't intend to hurt anybody. I did it for your good. I wasn't trying to be a problem. I wasn't trying to condemn you. All these things that you're accusing me of and judging me of by your scrutinizing judgment, those are not my motives. Therefore, my conscience is clear. Now, the issue of motive is going to come up here in just a minute, so stay with me. So, it is possible that a scrutinizing judgment can come your way, and if all you do is the first three things that you're not to do, accept it from others, accept it from human authorities, and don't do it to yourself, but your conscience isn't clear. In other words, there is truth about what they're saying, then your conscience isn't clear. And so you are responsible before God to test your conscience to see, am I guilty of what I'm being judged for? If the answer to that is no, then your conscience is clear. So that's the first thing that we are to do. We're to check our conscience. We're to pause long enough and in the situation that is going on, in the criticism that is going on. We're to pause long enough to question and check our conscience. The second thing that we're to do is a very interesting phrase. Paul says, my conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. Now, what does that mean? The second thing I'm to do is to be open to the possibility that you may have missed something in the circumstance. Okay, it's possible that your understanding and your motive and your conscience clear aspects, you may have missed something where your tact wasn't good, or there was something that was said that you said or did that was misunderstood and not your intent. Those kinds of things can take place. So it's possible, or at least be open to the possibility that my conscience may be clear, but I may not be innocent. So if you're not innocent of something, in other words, if there's legitimacy to the criticism, then that means that something needs to be judged. Now, what they're accusing you of may not need to be judged, but you may come to the conclusion that well, okay, but there is the aspect of how I said what I said, or the words that I used. Okay, I recognize that that even though my conscience is clear, my intent was not to do harm. My intent was to do good, but maybe the words that I used, I could have used better words. So that means that I may not be innocent. So that aspect of it needs to be judged. Now, if you're not going to accept their judgment of it, and you're not going to accept human authorities' judgment of it, and you're not going to accept your judgment of it, who does that leave? Because you may conclude that something needs to be judged. Well, that leaves God. I'm going to submit the thing to God, and that's what the thing I'm to do is. So I'm to be sure that my conscience is clear. I'm to be open to the possibility of overlooking something. I may not be innocent. And so I'm going to, if that's the case, I'm going to submit that to God for judgment. Because I've concluded that, okay, something about the situation still deserves judgment. Even though my conscience is clear, even though I'm not accepting their scrutinizing criticism, and I'm not accepting the scrutinizing criticism of the world, and I'm not even going to scrutinize and criticize myself, but I can say that there's something about this, words I used or whatever, might need judgment. So I'm going to submit it to God for judgment. So when Paul says, but God is my judge, now the word judge there is not anakrino. It is krino. And so krino means to judiciously judge guilt or innocence. It's not to examine something. It is to judiciously determine guilt or innocence. That's why that when the Bible says, judge not lest you be judged, the word there that is being used is krino. Because Jesus, that's a quote from Jesus. And when Jesus says, don't judge lest you be judged, he goes on to say, because by the same standard that you're using to judge the other person, that standard will be used to judge you. And the word there is krino. And so the believer, the Christian, is not to be doing judicial judgments, because only God is in a position to do that. If I conclude that I'm not innocent of something, what I said and how I said it is not what I'm being accused of, but I recognize that that could have been better, then I submit that to God. And if God has an opinion about that, if God deals with me about that, then I am obligated to listen to that. If God doesn't deal with me about that, if my conscience remains clear, then there is no judgment, there is no guilt or innocence in about whatever it was that came to my mind that I might not be innocent. So it's very, very important that we understand who we submit the issue to for judgment. But when I'm being criticized and when I'm being scrutinized with anakrino, that scrutinizing, condemning judgment, I don't have to. In fact, I'm told not to accept that kind of scrutiny from others or authorities. I'm not even to do it to myself. I am to check my conscience. I am to be open to the fact that I may have missed something, that there may be something about how I did it or what I did, how I said what, and what I said might need to be looked at, but I submit that to God for judgment. Now, those are the 6 things, okay? I care very little if you judge me. I don't accept it from others. I don't accept it from human authorities. I don't accept that kind of scrutiny. I don't even do it to myself. I check my conscience to be sure that I haven't violated something in my conscience about that. If I am innocent, or if something needs judgment, then I'm going to submit that to God. Then he goes on to the last phrase that is very important. He says, "Therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time." The word "judge" there is again krino. He's telling believers not to judiciously judge each other. Okay, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait till the Lord comes. Now, many times I've had, when I've taught this in great detail in dealing with the teaching of biblical counselors and things, they said, "You mean to tell me that if we've got a situation where we're being scrupulously evaluated, judged, that we got to wait till Jesus comes back for that to be resolved?" And I'm saying, yep, because we are not equipped. We're told not to krino each other, and we really don't know the motives of people, because look at what Paul says. "Therefore, do nothing before the appointed time. Judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness, and he will expose the motives of men's hearts." Only God can expose the motives of men's hearts. In all of this judging back and forth and scrutinizing back and forth, we don't know the motives of people's hearts, and they don't know the motive of ours. And so God is the only one who's in a position to righteously determine the rightness or the wrongness of motives. Now, putting all this together, we have some application that can apply to very hurtful types of behavior that takes place in this world, where we come under the scrutinizing condemnation of somebody. Putting it all together and doing it all together, as far as all of these 6 things, is very, very important. And like I said earlier, I have used this in dealing with people who have had severe trauma and survivor guilt, people that were medics in the Army during the Vietnam War, and they felt guilty because they survived and the guys that they were treating on the battlefield didn't. Emergency responders going to car wrecks and things, and they did everything that they knew to do, and still the person died. And so we call this survivor guilt. I should have been able to do more. Why couldn't I save them? Those kinds of questions. It can be that severe, okay? I've used these things, and I've gone through it with them, step by step by step, and it's helped them come to grips with what happened in those horrible situations, and the kind of guilt and the kind of shame and the kind of self-condemning scrutiny that they are doing to themselves. And so it can have application in very severe types of condemnation. It can have very positive application in family issues, where family oftentimes will shame each other, and especially in dysfunctional families where there's a lot of shame that goes around. and a lot of damage is done to people's personalities, especially children, when that kind of family relationship exists. This passage is a powerful, powerful passage for application. So we talk about making space for Jesus in our life. Is there a sin to confess, a promise to claim, an attitude to change, a command to obey, or an example to follow? These 3 short verses are packed with examples to follow, attitudes to change. A lot of applications can come to play here. So we're going to show, again, the 2 slides that deal with what not to do, the 3 things not to do, the 3 things to do, and our acrostic, S.P.A.C.E. Take a moment to look down through those and see if any of that can be applied to situations in your life where you are experiencing or have experienced scrutinizing judgment. All right, you may want to spend more time in the application section of this one, but we're glad that you're with us tonight, and hopefully you're looking forward to Easter. Easter is fast approaching. We're going to have sunrise service Easter Sunday morning, as well as our regular morning worship time. So invite a neighbor, invite a friend to be part of our Easter services. The statistics say that 86% of people who don't normally go to church would come to church on Easter Sunday if somebody that they know would invite them. And so invite somebody, invite them to come to church. You might be surprised that they might come with you on Easter Sunday. So we're looking forward to a fine Easter Sunday, and all of the other activities between now and then in our ministries at Old Zion Hill. So we'll sign off for now, and we'll see you later. Good night. Just want to remind you about the D-Life journal that we're using. We're going to be using this for the next year as our church's daily Bible reading and our discipleship tools that we'll be using throughout our ministries. The journal is appearing on your screen. That's the book that we're going to be using. If you would like one, you can contact the church office. The number there is appearing on the screen. Talk to Pam, and if you would like to get a copy of the D-Life journal and use it, either in a discipleship group or your Sunday school class, or just for your personal daily Bible reading, or as a part of our Wednesday night virtual D-Life class, we'll be using this book to guide us week by week by week in our Bible studies. So if you would like one, contact the church office, and we'll be sure that you'll get one. We'll hope to see you soon. Talk to you later.